declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. All right. If you have not seen this video, I would highly recommend you watch this. This is the most incredible video I have ever watched in getting me to reprogram the way I think about some passages in the Bible, in getting me to reprogram the way I think about the heavens and how important they are. So Star of Bethlehem, totally worth it. The author in this video sets forth being able to go into some programs and knowing for sure exactly which day Christ was born. And so he goes through and he shows you that indeed the constellation Virgo had a moon under her feet, and the Christ child was born on that day. So if you're thinking Revelation 12, that happened September 11th of 3 BC, is what he says. And that happened to be Feast of Trumpets that year. Right on a moed, right on schedule. Okay? All right. So God stamps the heavens. It's very important that we understand this, because we can miss so much of the story if we're not paying attention. Now I want to show you pretty much the grand finale of this whole thing. Okay? I want to show you the grand finale of what's coming. All right? This is so cool. Revelation chapter 12. Let's just read through it, and then we're going to go through the last video. Revelation 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. Verse 3. Then another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems. And his tail swept away 1/3 of the stars of heaven, and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God, so that there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. Okay. We're going to roll into this video, and this is pretty much the grand finale, you guys. This is just the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay? All right, so checking out Comment Elenin, I want you to be clued into what's happening from God's viewpoint. In Leviticus 23, he tells Moses to have the Jews start celebrating 7 feast days. And that word feast in Hebrew is moed. And actually what you see, the meaning of that word actually means appointment. So there are 7 appointments on the Jewish calendar that occur every year. And one of those appointments is called the Feast of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah. And if you look on chadbad.org, I'm going to show you, just so that you can see, that indeed we're in September of 2011 here on chadbad.org. And I'm going to scroll down, and indeed you're going to see that Rosh HaShana, or Yom Teruah, is a 2-day feast that starts on September 29th and also on the 30th. Knowing that now, I want to show you something that is just unbelievably amazing. There's a free program on the internet called Stellarium. It's open source, and this is a software program. Get rid of that. This is a software program where you can actually pull up the constellations in the heavens and orbits and all sorts of things. So it's pretty cool. You can actually import certain asteroids or comets, and I put Comet Elenin in here. So I'm going to pull up Comet Elenin. There's a whole process to pull that up. Okay, so now it's tracking Comet Elenin. I'm going to go to the eastern sky, and now we're going to go to Feast of Trumpets this year, and I think you're going to be amazed at what we see. Okay, I'm going to bring up the constellations. I'm going to get rid of this atmosphere. All right. Okay, so here we go. This is the constellation Virgo. And let me just move her a little bit up. Okay. So here we see the constellation Virgo. This is September 27th. And if we go one day prior, we're going to go to the 26th. You're going to see that indeed Comet Elenin is blocking out the sun, and this is where the sun should be blocked out for about 3 days' time. That's exactly where we see it in position in the constellation of Virgo. Now here's what's interesting. If you read the book of Revelation, chapter 12, you're going to see that it says in verse 1, it says, "A great sign appeared in heaven." Most scholars have only looked at maybe a spiritual aspect of what this passage is saying, but here is an actual sign in heaven that seems to fulfill Revelation chapter 12 to the T on Feast of Trumpets this year. Check it out. "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth." So here we see exactly what this passage is depicting. On the 27th here, I'm going to go backwards in time. So here's the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. You see Elenin in front of the sun, like we had talked about. And now we're going to see Elenin now go up to her head. There's the 27th, and you're seeing the moon. Watch the moon. The moon is dropping down. The moon's been up above her head here. The moon now just dropped down to her shoulder on the 27th. And also pay attention to Venus. Venus is entering into Virgo's womb. And Saturn is in her womb as well. So Virgo here on the 27th enters into the womb of Virgo. And then the moon now on the 28th is down by her hand. But look what happens on Feast of Trumpets on the 29th. Here we go. The moon now is at her feet. Virgo's womb is full of Saturn and Venus. She's clothed in the sun, and Elenin now with its tail now is going to be cast this way into her head, and is going to look like a garland of stars in her head. The passage says that she has 12 stars in her head. So possible fulfillment of that, and is really a once-in-a-lifetime event, is that Elenin is in her head, and her tail is casting this image of 12 stars. But also beyond that, I have researched online that her head indeed has 12 stars inside of it. So if you zoom in on her head, you'll see some stars, and if you begin to count them, there is indeed 12 stars in her head. But like I said, I think that the fulfillment is actually Comet Elenin in her head at this time. All right, so looking at now Venus being in her womb, Venus is known as the morning star. And if we look at Revelation chapter 22, verse 16, Jesus refers to himself as the bright morning star. And so this woman is known to be Israel, and Christ being in her womb is being spoken of as being born. Well, here's the bright morning star, Venus, in the womb of Virgo as she gives birth to him. And then also you're going to notice that Saturn is also in her womb. Well, Saturn is known by the occultists as the dragon, and also is referred to as the Greek mythological person Kronos. So if we look at Kronos on Wikipedia, you can see that reading through Kronos, you can see that that one of the things that Kronos was worried about was that its child was going to actually become greater and overpower him. And so anytime a child was being born, he would devour them all as soon as they were born to preempt this prophecy from taking place. So Kronos was known as devouring his children. And that is exactly what we see here. I'm actually going to pull up now Virgo in the Starry Nights program, and this is where you see it a little bit better. You see Elenin's tail now in Virgo's head a little bit more, crowning her with a wreath of stars, is what it'll appear like in the heavens. You see Venus and Saturn now in her womb, and she's clothed in the sun. And here's the moon at her feet. And obviously it's a very small slivered moon because it is Feast of Trumpets, which is the feast where that always starts on a new moon. So that appears to fulfill Revelation 12 to the T, and you see that Venus is right there next to Saturn. So Saturn is right there just waiting to destroy the child, just like Revelation 12 says. I'll read that one more time. And it says, and the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. So going back now to Stellarium. And if you look now, you'll see something that I haven't really seen anyone else point out. It's not that big a deal, but Feast of Trumpets is a 2-day feast. So not only you see here September 29th is the moon under her feet, but then also the second day of the feast, September 30th. When I move that forward to September 30th, which here we are, we're at September 30th here. If I drop out the atmosphere here, or the ground, you'll actually see that the moon indeed is still there and under her feet. So the moon is under her feet for both of the 2 days of the Feast of Trumpets, September 29th and the 30th. Very amazing. I'll bring back up the ground. And then I want to point out that as we continue on, you're going to see before Feast of Trumpets that around the 27th and 28th, Elenin comes up around her head and appears like she's crying. Well, if you read verse 2, it says she was with child and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. And if you continue on past these dates of Feast of Trumpets, there's the 29th, there's the 30th. Keep your eye on Venus now in her womb. Venus now is going to exit the womb of Virgo. And of course the child is being born, just as the passage says. So there's the 5th and the 6th. So indeed, that's exactly what's taking place. And Kronos, or Saturn, the red dragon, as this passage says, is ready to devour her child, just like it says in verse 4 of Revelation 12. So there you have it, you guys. There's the major sign. This Feast of Trumpets 2011, September 29th and 30th, of a woman clothed in the sun. She has a child. She's pregnant with a child, and the moon is indeed under her feet. She's got a crown from Comet Elenin. So